Something loud noise to grab your attention, get you to stop scrolling your feed. It's episode 3 of Why Diets Fail, Return of the Science. In this episode, we're talking about energy restoration, the second prong of your body's self-defense system. In the second episode, we talked about the first prong of the self-defense system, which is metabolic adaptation. Slowing down your body's metabolic rate in order to prevent you from starving yourself. In the second prong of the self-defense system, we talk about restoration. So let's get into it. So now I want you to think about where your body's at. You've been on a diet for a while. What is the main goal of your body besides preventing you from starving yourself? The first prong of the self-defense system, metabolic adaptation. Again, slowing your metabolic rate down so you don't starve yourself. Well, the second priority is ensuring that when you come across food, that your body is able to capture that efficiently and store as much energy as possible. When you're dieting, and you're starting to get into a little bit longer diet or low calories, you have decreased fatty acid oxidation in adipose.
Check this out, though. First of all, you're throwing too many big words at me. Okay, now, because I don't understand them, I'm going to take them as disrespect.
All right, so your fat cells are turning over less fatty acids. You're burning less fatty acids just from dieting. You also have increased expression of genes that code for fatty acid synthesis. So I want you to think about this for a minute. You're actually turning on genes that are priming you for fat storage. This is while you're still in a calorie deficit. So your body is getting you ready so that when you come across food, you are better able to store it. This makes sense from a teleological perspective or evolutionary perspective, because if you had been in a famine or caloric restriction and you came across food, you would not want to waste it. You'd want to capture as much of it as possible and be able to store it as energy to restore your depleted energy reserves. And that brings me to my third and final point. Shit, I gotta sneeze. I think. You know when you're like right on the edge of a sneeze, but it's not quite there, but you know if you keep talking, you will sneeze. On the precipice, you could say, yes.
A few minutes later.
This brings me to my third and final point. Increased efficiency of refeeding. Now, what the hell is that? Okay, if you take two people and assume they're genetically identical, same weight, same lean body mass, same fat mass, all that kind of stuff, same activity level, and you take one of them who has been dieting, calorically restricted, versus somebody who's just been eating at maintenance or eating in a calorie surplus, and you give them a challenge meal, you give them a high calorie meal, what you'll find is the person who's been in the maintenance phase or caloric surplus will dissipate a lot of the energy that they get as heat. They'll actually waste a lot of it. We call that thermogenesis, diet-induced thermogenesis. But when somebody's been dieting, they don't have that same response. Their body actually increases the efficiency at which they capture those calories. And so their metabolic rate does not go up nearly as much as somebody who's been eating at maintenance or in a surplus. Again, this makes sense if you think about the evolutionary perspective of all this. If your body's goal is to restore the depleted energy reserves from dieting, when you came across food, you would want to capture it. These two also contribute to that, because now the food you've eaten, you have increased expression of genes that synthesize fatty acids. You can take this food and stuff it into adipose tissue more easily. Many of you have experienced this at the end of a diet. You say things like, man, if I eat a one meal, high calorie meal, everything seems to stick to me. That is because of this, because of the second prong of your body's self-defense system, the energy restoration prong. Okay? And then finally, I hear people say things all the time like, well, you can't gain fat in one meal. You can't gain fat from one bad meal. That is complete and utter horseshit. You absolutely can gain fat from one meal. In fact, many of you, especially competitors, have had the experience of going out and having a huge cheat meal after a show, and waking up the next day 5, 10, even 15 pounds heavier. Is some of that water? Sure. But a lot of that ends up sticking around, and water doesn't stick around for 6 months. I'm just saying. You're capturing that energy efficiently. Whereas if you had been in the off season and not dieting or in a calorie surplus, you would not have stored nearly that amount of energy because your body would not be sensing that you're in a famine. When your body senses you're in a famine, it's trying to protect you by upregulating these systems that deal with energy storage. This is how people get confused with the term calories in and calories out. They assume that calories in and calories out are two independent systems, when in fact they are innately tied together. Calories in, the amount of calories you consume, influences calories out. If you eat more calories, your body will be wasteful with them over time, will adapt to that, and expend more calories. If you eat less calories, your body expends less calories. Why would it do that, Layne? Well, I'm so glad you asked.
Listen, white boy, nobody fucking asks you.
If you're eating less calories consistently, your body is going to sense that you're in a calorie deficit, which it senses as famine, and it's going to protect you with its self-defense system to prevent you from starving and try to restore those energy levels. If you're always eating at maintenance or in a surplus, your body is going to sense that you are not in a famine, food is plentiful, and we can be wasteful with it. You can use this to your advantage or to your disadvantage. And in the 4th episode next week, we're going to talk about the body's trump card it uses when you really screw up and how this can actually lead you to put on more and more body fat over time. Make sure you tune in next week. Click like if you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll catch you guys next week.